Good afternoon, Marie. How you doing? You well?
Yeah, I'm very well. Yes,
Good,
so
good,
I'm happy.
good. We're here to talk about. Well, I'm really keen to talk about the Jamaicans, really, an action drama feature which is your baby, and you're currently working on seeking funding for, and a pertinent story that you believe really needs to be told. I'm told it's inspired by you reading V.S. Reid's 1976 novel of the same title. Tell me more.
Yeah, so I'll tell you the story of how I started on this journey. It was a long time ago. Long time ago, I live in Bristol right now, but I just moved to London. I was living just off Brixton Hill. I didn't have very much money. I was just trying to build a career in the film and television industry, whichever by hook or by crook. But I have always been a prolific reader. So I was, one day I was just hunting through the junk store across the road through this warehouse, and they just done a house clearance. There were a load of books in a box, and I found a copy of V.S. Reid's The Jamaicans, and literally read it cover to cover in a couple of days. And I couldn't believe that I hadn't been told this story. I couldn't believe that I hadn't been introduced to this author who, he grew up in Jamaica. As I started to learn more about him, I realized, he'd done a lot, he'd been to England and read pieces of it. He'd written a few other novels, including The Leopard, which is, he'd written some pieces about sort of West Africa. And then, I couldn't, I just think it was a big gap in my learning. And it took me on a bit of a journey. It took me on a major journey. So my mission really at that time, though, this is how long ago it was. The internet was a baby. Like, you literally couldn't find very much information about anything at that point in time. And I really wanted to know, was he still alive? What was he doing? And so I kind of had an idea that, the more I learned about Victor Stafford Reid and the time he was writing, so sort of 60s into the 70s. So he started sort of around the pre-independence period. And it was a very connected and cultural period in Jamaican history when there were writers and artists who were being sort of touted around the world and in Europe. So very, it's gone a long way from where it was to where we are now, and it swings. And but they were all really connected, and he was writing with a lot of contemporaries and like Roger Mays, and there were lots of artists and lots of politicians. So they were moving towards independence with the Manleys, and he was in that world. But because I couldn't find anything over here, I thought of a project, and put it to the British Council, and they paid me to go to Jamaica. And it was the first time I'd ever been to Jamaica. Both my parents are Jamaican. And so I went to try and find this author, and I found immediately that he had died, but I found his son, who then gave me an option on the book to turn it into a film, or to turn it into something. At that time, I was thinking it was going to be an exhibition or an audio piece or something else. And then this evolved.
How's the quest for funding going? I know it can be an arduous and unenviable task. But I understand you're working with Niche on Demand, right? Talk to me about them, because I know that they're an equitable studio for Black creators.
Yeah, they're new, and a bit like me, we're just going for it. I say the beginning of the crowdfund is slow to begin with, because we're just feeling our way a little bit, and it's a new platform. But Niche on Demand, I like them because not just because it's headed by two females, but because they understand, they've worked internationally, so they understand what it takes in real terms to make projects of this nature, and to compete, on an international market, and what it takes to be able to do it independently. So that's what attracted me to them. And I think that in terms of the crowdfund, if we, I want to make the money, I'm not asking for the largest pot. What I'm asking for is an opportunity to build a team, a production team. So that's a director, exec producers, to start the casting process, so that we can then build a package that presents it to people with the real with large amounts of money, who can then say, okay, this is worth making. I'm sure it's worth making. I'm sure there's an audience for it. And I think that I feel that not just because I'm Jamaican, and because I think this period in history is is fascinating and often untold, and it's pre-maroon. So it's that bit. It's literally the point at which the English invaded Jamaica, and it started a 5-year war that led to, so you probably need a tiny bit of context. The Spanish had been incumbent in Jamaica for over almost 200 years, I think, at that point. So the English were English under Oliver Cromwell were determined to build an empire bigger than the Spanish Catholic Empire. They wanted their Protestant empire to rule the waves. And so they had gone to Haiti with the intention of taking Haiti, and they failed badly, really, really badly. And they were too scared to go back to England and tell Cromwell that they failed, so they decided to take Jamaica instead. At that time, kind of a way, and there was a lot of were there, but everything, it wasn't like the biggest point of focus because they didn't have the resources that Central America had, and the Spanish had sort of gone off it. Possibly my internet is doing something weird.
Okay, cool, nice.
Yeah, so they went to take this island, and by that point the Spanish, as I said, had kind of lost interest, and the Spanish had brought slaves from Africa. They were also from the west, but also North Africa. So it was quite a mix of cultures already there, and not to mention the indigenous Arawak/Tiano Indian, Tianos who were already on the island, most of which had died at the moment Columbus and everyone else stepped onto the island with their diseases. But the Spanish had freed most of those people, and half of them were living up in the mountains, or they'd escaped and run away, and they were living in the mountains, living in the hills, farming the land, tending animals, just living their lives. And then the British arrived, wanting to fight again, and they were just determined to keep their freedom. So they, there were many, call them militias, but they were communities that formed armies to fight the English. And because they didn't have the weaponry and the armory that the English had, they had to use stealth. And it's, kind of one of the earlier examples of what we'd call now guerrilla warfare. They used the land as their weapon, and they were able to keep the English at bay and to keep them frightened enough not to venture too far for 5 years. They did it a bit with the help of the Spanish. They worked alongside the Spanish at that point, but their aim was just to remain free of everyone. The end of that period is a moment of controversy in Jamaica, because the leader of the militia that this film focuses on, Juan de Bola, is both a hero and a traitor, because he decided after too many deaths that he would side with the English. Offered him an opportunity to stop the war in return for a role in their army and land for his people, and he said yes. He didn't last much longer after that. He got taken out quite quickly, but it stopped the major fighting. It didn't stop all of it, because the people who then became the Maroons continued. They didn't stop, and they haven't stopped until today. And not the fighting, but owning their own space, being their own people, ruling.
They've been pretty vocal of recent, haven't they?
And they have, because they're being threatened. I mean, they're constantly being threatened because they're independent of everything. They're independent of the two major Jamaican parties. They rule themselves, and that's not an easy thing to be in this world at the moment.
A bit about you, Marie. Your work has appeared on Channel 4, Netflix, BBC. You've written a couple of plays, one staged at the Corbett Theatre, and this year you were a finalist in the inaugural Writers Lab UK and Ireland script development program. Clearly, you're still sharpening your expansive set of tools. But how's the journey been thus far, though?
I think it's been varied, and I think that what I would say is this: is that in my early years, I had talent, but I lacked confidence, and I wasn't very good, I think, at building that network you need around you to make you strong enough to survive in this industry. And I would say that's the biggest difference between then and now. So often if I got knocked, I would just move on, and it meant that I started I started as a director. I was writing. My first piece was a piece for Channel 4 a very long time ago. And then I moved, and then, there was a glitch. And so I moved into interactive television, and I worked on Big Brother for many years, and lots of other interactive shows, sort of at the beginning of all of that stuff. And then I did 9 years as a producer in Channel 4 in their digital team, creating lots of different types of content, from games to videos, you name it, really, interactive experiences. And I really loved that period of time. And it was after that, but it was after I left Channel 4 that I just realized I always knew my first love was writing. I never stopped writing. I just didn't show anyone what I was writing. And then I just decided that that was enough. I had to find a way to build the confidence to be strong enough. And I also had to put myself in a position that I had enough people around me that I could take the knocks. The right people, not just enough, but the right people. That might not be a lot of people, but I think it's really important. And that, I would say, is the crux of my journey, why it has been in some ways like that, but always at the core, I've always been led by stories. I've always been led by film. And so it was in some ways inevitable that I would come back to this. And the writing, it was literally because I've had the Jamaicans. I was trying to find somebody else to write it. And then a producer, the guy who made one of the producers on This Is England, said, look, why don't you just write it yourself? And I thought, oh yeah, because I always saw action as a man's male territory. But I love action films, in the same way as I love science fiction. And, it's, and I've got 2 brothers. And so how can you not love martial arts? And, and I'm a comic reader, and, so it's all of those things. So I just wrote it. And the first draft of that, I entered into the Sundance Screen Lab, and it was shortlisted, didn't get any further, but I think it was my first ever feature. I still think that was a good first shot, and that was just a couple of years ago. So I've just worked on it since then. I've worked on my craft, and I've attended different workshops. I apply for things left, right, and center. I get somewhere. I think what I see is that I'm getting better at my craft, and I'm definitely not going to move from this area.
I alluded to you sharpening your tools earlier. What would the next few years look like if they went perfectly from your perspective? If you could, devoid obviously of all of the frustrations that are within this industry, if you could get to a mountaintop.
Good and bad in every industry. I've honestly got to say that having experienced quite a few of them, I'll honestly say that, like, the same politics you'll find, I don't know, in a hospital, you're going to find in film and television. It's I think it's just going to be, it always in the end comes down to your attitude, your perspective, and whether or not you can overcome that. If that's what I would say. And my next few years, obviously, with Jamaicans, I can't wait to stand on the stage and watch it get released, whichever format that takes. But ideally, I want to see it on the big screen. With the mentoring program I'm doing at the moment, which is a American, sort of New York, UK collaboration. So the New York side of things, is headed by people like, is supported by people like Nicole Kidman and Oprah Winfrey. So and over here, it's Kate Blanchett. So it's kind of high level, but it's for women over 40 writing drama. It's a completely original series, very British, very, it's very different from the Jamaicans, in the same way as I have another project that's much more sort of young, rave-based, science fiction-y. I would see myself making all of those. But equally, I would see myself working in writers' rooms. I want to learn, I want to get better. And I also want to work with people who are good, that I can learn from. And I love working on other people's writing and stories, because it gives you a chance to develop characters that you might not have considered, and to bring something of you into their world. And in that sense, all of my amalgamated experiences become valuable.
I'd imagine the name Juan de Bola is going to be Googled a lot more once the Jamaicans comes to life. What other names digging down into that whole historical barrel of, you know, unknowns, did you kind of pick up that were like, they were quite a significant person who has been erased from history? Looking at, you know, the synopsis for this production, I thought to myself, we need this. We need to tell these stories in order to redress the balance of knowledge where history is concerned. So speak on maybe someone else's name that surfaced from digging into the Jamaicans that kind of left an indelible mark with you.
Well, you know, within that period of time, you know, you had Juan de Bola, but you also had Juan Ceres, and you had the Black Hunter, and they were both like huge, formidable fighters, you know, and they were like cowboys, but in Jamaica. You know, they rode horses. They were out there, you know, doing their work and also living for their freedom. You know, they were negotiators. They were, you know, armed combatants. You know, they were all of these things. Those are like people who feature in this story that should be known about, you know, because for all the reasons that you just said. I think where I think that I find that the period I think has in some ways has been erased, and you're going to have to excuse me, I may have to like come back to you with some more names, because I haven't really thought deeply about the arts end of the world and the culture. You know, there are so many writers and, you know, fine artists and contemporary artists who were working in that period of time, that pre-independence, and they've been lost, you know, in some ways to, I think, the young British, Black, Jamaican, Caribbean people. They've been lost, and they should be well known because they were, you know, they were known then, you know, and I think we should do more to promote that end of the world. I mean, you know, this film, of course, would have to have an amazing soundtrack, you know, because it is Jamaica, and but equally, Jamaica isn't just reggae music, and it isn't just dancehall, you know, and I think that that's the thing that, you know, astounded, you know, shocked me a bit when I went there, because then when I went to Mona and I went to university and I started talking to these different people, and, you know, especially because I was looking at literature, you know, as I was meeting a different set of people, and I was just sad. I was sad because I think I might have been inspired in a different direction a lot earlier had I known, and had I read as many of their books as I've read now. So I think, yeah, people, that's where I think maybe The Voice could do some more work around that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, where Jamaica's concerned, we feel like we do quite a bit, but there is always more to be done. So.
Oh yeah, no, I know you. I'm not like, that's not a criticism, but I mean, like,
yeah, no. I mean, like
top
I said,
10
always
influential authors, if they, you know, experience.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree with you. I'm not dismissing it. I was more because I know if the minute I say yeah, you're right, everybody from every Caribbean island will come and say, "What about us?" And every African country. So I just wanted to kind of make it clear. You know, there's always more to be done.
I definitely think it's not just Jamaica, you know, but obviously we are talking about Jamaica.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. So when's this out in the shops, as they say?
I should imagine you're not going to see anything at least until it would be late 2022, but probably 2023. It's a feature. It takes that long.
Oh yeah, no, I get it, and I'm glad I caught you at this end of the process.
It's early, so I would say if people want to get involved or get in touch, they should. You know,
you might find there's more people willing to do that than not. So that's why I wanted you to kind of speak it into existence, really.
Yeah. I mean, I have a wish list of people, but I don't want to give names. I'll just keep them in my head, and maybe the universe will.
As long as you don't do what you did with your writing and not show anybody, then we might get, we might get
well, that's true. Actually, maybe I should give you my list. But I think it, you know, those people who know that they're at a standard, I think in the beginning, I need people who've made stuff, you know, whether it's from like David P. Davis, who's with Bad Wolf, or Sheila Nortley, or Kanya King, because I know that she's moving back towards film, you know, and there's more people on the American end of the world, you know, on the American side of the world who you know, production companies that have been supportive from, you know, producers like Dee Dee Gardner or Deborah Martin Chase, directors like Casey Lemons. You know, obviously we've just had The Harder They Fall. You know, James Samuels would be a good option. I'd love it to be a female, I'll say that, because, you know, why not? And
why not?
the Queen,
why not?
You know, of course, but they could be supporters of the new gen, you know. So there you go. Those are the top 10 from me.
Well, good luck.
Thank
Really
you very
wishing you
much.
all the best, and thanks for talking
Sure.
to you. It's been interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Glad to meet you.